Hi. Um, Decided just to do another quick online post. I'm not sure if anybody's out there watching, but if you're not, just more for me, just to kind of go over what's been going on through the past week. This week I didn't get too many books. I got two. The first one I got was Slice of Mallow, Second Slice, by Adam Foreman. Adam Foreman's a cartoonist out of the UK. These are children's books, and I became familiar with him with this book. And this is something that I saw solicited in previews last year. And something about the cover just kind of got me, and I became uh, friends with him and followed his Instagram account online before the book came out, so I was familiar with his work. And it's just a really lovely, fun cartoon. They're children's books. This is the kind of art you see. They're simple, they're fun. There is a lesson to them, but it doesn't hit you over the head with a lesson so it's the lesson isn't so obvious, but there are lessons. And I think if you read to your children in English, these are great little books. They're slim, easy to understand. The cartooning is great, very pleasing to the eye, very well thought out, nice humor, even something that adults will find funny. Just really good books. So this is just coming out this upcoming week, I believe, and it's 11.99. You can find this in any bookstore. Your comic book store can order it. Just really, really fun books, and I'm glad I got one. Thank you, Adam. And in the mail, I also got this. This is Lapsos by Ines Estrada. Ines is a Mexican cartoonist. How I found out about Ines was years ago, I guess during or shortly after the pandemic, during that time. I bought this, Alienation. And this is from Fantagraphics. This was published in 2019. This book, I would say, this book, what really gets me, and this is one of my favorite graphic novels, is that this book deals with the combination, oh, hi, uh, the combination of climate change, augmented reality, technology, the impacts of climate change as far as like jobs, food scarcity, all these things, and just kind of at this point where they kind of all these different factors hit. And like I said, this book is 6 years old, so it's a little bit ahead of its time. And I think in a lot of ways, it's the most realistic viewpoint of a planet, that a potential future for the planet, maybe 50 years from now. Really solid book. I really like this. Now, this is out of print. You can find it on eBay, A Books, but it's kind of expensive because she has a very strong cult-like following. So she makes books that are relatively small print runs, and once they sell it, they sell out, and they can go for a lot of money. I think this book retailed for 20 bucks back then. I think I've seen it for like 40 online. Maybe you can get a little bit less. It's an excellent book. I really recommend this. And there's a friend of mine from the UK that does these videos like I do about books, covers books, but he does small press books and zines, like really small limited press. And I'm sorry, Ines Estrada, to answer Nathan's question. You can find her on Instagram as at Inechi underscore. That's INECHI underscore. That's Ines Estrada. She had some kind of illness issues, so she couldn't work. She didn't do work for a while. She has a lot of stickers and a lot of things, but I think she's starting to gear up for more graphic novel and comics work. And as I was saying, there's a person on YouTube called Best Small Press. It's one word. They do these small low print run zines, and they're out of the UK, and I think they work part time or full time, not sure, in a comic book store. And he happens to be a fan of Ines Estrada, so he started talking about all these books from Ines Estrada that he had, and he was showing them off. And I didn't realize, bad for me, I didn't do the digging. So I just said, well, let me look. And so I started looking around for some of the books, and I found this, Lapsos. This was originally published in Spanish, and then in 2014, I think, this was published by a Belgium publisher, and I think there's like 1,000. I think the print run was like 1,000 or maybe 1,200, and it's a little hardcover, and the price was pretty decent. Um, what I found interesting was that in it is a postcard, and it reads from Ines Estrada, Chris, this is a gift from your friend Juliet. I hope you enjoy it. So, and it's dated June 2015. So I guess Chris didn't appreciate it, but one man's loss is another man's gain. So I was able to get this via abooks.com, and really like the work. Just kind of an interesting cartooning style. Looks simple, but it really kind of like it's actually deceptively simple, if that makes any sense. And she uses, different color patterns and all that. It's just very unique work. So there's a book of hers called Impatience that I didn't know existed, and now I'm definitely looking forward to. Sorry. And who made it? Nathan. Okay. Ines Estrada, if I didn't answer your question before. INES, and the last name is Estrada, Estrada. As I said, very interesting. This is the back cover. Very interesting, unique personality and cartoonist. Um, I'm really looking for more for work from her in the future, and I'm hoping that Fantagraphics republishes this or reprints this. It's just a great book, a little more relevant today than maybe 5, 6 years ago. And I really haven't read. I've been reading a lot, but what I've been really reading is this. This is a new book that was published by Humanoids. This is by Kaza, Arkady and the Lost Titan. This is a saga that took 20 years for the cartoonist to do, and Philippe Cazat is one of the people, along with Drouillet and Mobius, that created one of the early people in heavy metal. Um, and well, when it was actually Metal Hurlant, and then when it was published in English, it was Heavy Metal. And and what this does is that this was published last year via Kickstarter, and to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the book, and it was a very successful Kickstarter. So this year, Humanoids just published it for the general market. It's quite expensive. It's 84.95, which is probably the most I've ever paid for a comic book. I don't know about ever, not ever, but it's up there. It's 528 pages, slightly oversized, hardcover, really beautiful book with this nice foil treatment. I think the light can catch it, and you can see a little bit of it. Uh, the inside is printed on this beautiful, high quality matte paper. Uh, the art is interesting because there's two stories. It's almost like Homer's The Iliad, one of these long mythological stories, meeting different characters on a long quest, that kind of um, type of story. And so basically, just to kind of make it as simple as possible, this is 10,000 years that the Earth have stopped spinning on its axis. So one side faces the sun, and one side faces again does not face the sun, and you have a point in between that's like a twilight point where that's where most of humanity lives. And so there's a quest to find this being, and we'll get more into it later. So there's two, almost two scenes. There's sceneries of being on the desert or being outside in the cold, and then there's scenes inside this futuristic city, and the art changes. So when you see the art as it is based on this, I'm going to look for a thing like this futurist. I mean, outside, like out in the elements, it almost has this look of. It looks European, but there's a lot of scenes where it looks a bit like reminds me a little bit of John Buscema's Conan work, especially the Savage Sword of Conan. But it has a little bit of that European flair to it. But then there are scenes like this that are very clean, and I wouldn't say Mobius like because that's an incredible comparison, but I would say that 1970s science fiction type of look. So far, I'm about halfway through the book, maybe a little bit more than halfway. So far, it's a pretty good story. This is something that, like I said, took them 20 years to do. They went to the original negatives, they remastered everything, they recolored everything, trying to make it as faithful as possible. The book looks great. It feels really good. It's a lovely book. If 1970s sci-fi is an interest of yours, and what I mean by that is that I remember when I was a kid growing up, sci-fi was more fantastical, let's say, Star Wars, Star Trek. But then when Alien came out in 1979, then later on, the success of Blade Runner and Outland, which was before Blade Runner, and then a Terminator, the whole dystopian future and grim and gritty future thing took hold, and it's still being done today. And I kind of miss that fantastical science fiction world, that kind of idea. So this is like that. So if that's something that you like, something that you find interesting, then I think this might be a good book for you to look at. You may want to look at it if it's at a bookstore, comic book store, whatever, and they have a copy that's open because this came shrink wrapped, just so you can look at it. But there's a lot of book here. Again, it's pretty expensive. I think DCBS not DCBS. I'm sorry. I think In Stock Trades, if they have it in stock still, had the best deal. Their shipping is over $50 is free, and all they do is charge sales tax. So I think you can get the book, and I think the last time I was here, someone pointed out they get the book for under little under $69 US, which is the best price you will find, unless some retailer gives you a better discount. Oh, hello, Kevin. What's cracking? Not too much. Um, and so, like I said, I really am enjoying this book. This reminds me of the sci-fi that I used to read. And if you like stuff from heavy metal or maybe Marvel's Epic Illustrated, for all of you old enough to remember that one, this is the kind of stuff I think you'd like. But it's a good story in that it's actually pretty well written. Like one of the things, I'm not going to compare it to the Inkle because I'll be honest with you, the Inkle for me personally, the art is amazing, but I'm not a really big fan of the story. I think the beginning was cool, the ending was cool, a lot of the middle was, I think Jodorowsky was just coming up with all this crazy stuff, and Mobius is such a genius, or was such a genius that he could interpret it and draw it and make something good out of it. But the story got really wonky towards the middle. And so, although the end was pretty good, I thought the end was pretty good. But this is actually a good story in that it develops characters. Like I said, it's a quest, and but it's not like they're always meeting new people and new races all the time. And sometimes creators want to like just throw everything in there. This thing is paced much better, and the art is phenomenal, spectacular. So, and there's not much of Kazaz's work that's translated in English. I mean, him, Mobius, Drouillet, all these Belgian Franco masters from the 70s, it seems like a lot of their work was translated like in the 80s, maybe early up to the early 90s, and that's it. And it's hard to find any new work by them translated into English that is of any real interest. It's a shame too because there is an audience for it. I mean, there's an older audience for it, but I think also you keep these things you keep these things fresh by making them available. That's just my opinion. Did I read something about Zero Kakare? Zero Kakare, I think. Yeah, actually, I did read up on him. He is the best known and best regarded cartoonist in Italy, from what I've read. I have yet to find anything translated to English. There might be a short story here or there, but there's nothing like a collection of work, unless maybe I missed it, but there's nothing like a collection of work. The work looks good, but I'd like to be able to read it. I, there are some people that get into comics, and for them, the art is like 75, 80% of the experience. They really don't even care if there's that much of a story. Hey, Mr. Blue. There's some people that don't even care about a story that much. They don't care. They just want to see really cool art. But I'm more, not 50-50, but, you know, 60-40, 40-60, 50-50. I like the story to be good as well as the art. The only exceptions I'll make is like when Mobius does some of his like self-drawn and self-written comics from like the let's say the 90s, 2000s, like in the book, the work featured in Inside Mobius, only because I don't understand it, and I don't even know if Mobius understood a lot of it. But the art is so good that for that, for him, I'll say, okay, well, you know, I'm not going to get much out of the story, but because I think he's one of those guys that was better when somebody else wrote the book and he drew it, as opposed to him writing and drawing. But the art is so wonderful that I give him a pass. I'll say, okay, fine, you know, I don't know what's going on, but damn, some of this art is beautiful. With this Kazaa book, I think it's a lot more story and good writing. I'm pretty impressed. But I wish they would make more of these things available. And as far as the Italian cartoonist, and I hope I'm pronouncing correctly, Zero Casare, or maybe Zero Cacciare, not sure. I speak Spanish, not Italian. The it's like I said, it's hard to find stuff in English, and I can look at the work and admire it, but I really won't get the full impact unless I can read it. And you know that's the downfall of liking comics, especially European cartoonists, or liking manga, and then a lot of the work is not translated into English. I have that with Osamu Tezuka, Yoshihiro Tatsumi. I can only read what's been translated in English, and especially with Tezuka, that's like the tip of the iceberg, even though I see more of his work being published on a routine basis. So that's really what I've only gotten. And recently I got this manga, Ultra Heaven. This is, si te escribo así, ¿me entiendes? ¿Me entiendes? Bueno, I speak Spanish. I'll be honest with you. I speak Spanish. I don't practice it as much because I work for a company that's predominantly English and Portuguese, so I may have to start learning a little Portuguese. But what I do a lot of times, if I really not sure, I'll just put it in Google Translate. I'm fully fluent in English and in English because that was my first language. So write, read, speak. Spanish, I can listen and I can understand, but if you write, I may have to put it in Google Translate. I'm just being real honest, but the translation services have gotten so good now that they really don't make that much of an error. Pero si tú te sientes más cómodo escribiendo en español, sigue así. Sí, mira, me escribe en español entonces. It doesn't really matter to me. Um, I sound like an American who learned Spanish because in a lot of ways, I grew up in Miami. I mean, I lived all my life here. I was born here, but I learned Cuban Spanish, and my mom kind of grew up in the Oriente, which is like in the eastern part is like basically what they call Los Campos, which for American translation is like hillbilly towns. It's like out in the boonies, and so I learned a lot of that Spanish, a lot of their slang. So in 2000, I worked for a company that had offices in Mexico City and in Colombia, and I'm a CPA, so I was talking to them in accounting. So I actually had an English, Spanish, Spanish, English dictionary of accounting terms, and I had to practice speak Spanish the entire day. So my Spanish sounds a lot like I learned from Mexico City. And Mexicans speak very good Spanish, very clean Spanish, professional Spanish that um, everybody can understand you. And so that's how I learned. I had to unlearn Spanish and then learn it again. But I speak predominantly English because that's my primary language, and that's what I speak most of the time. Even though in Miami people speak Spanish often, um, it's that it's I don't get as many opportunities to practice it as I used to, especially at work. It's either English or some people. I don't deal with the Portuguese people and people in Brazil, but that's something that I've been considering of trying to learn a little bit of Portuguese. And it's funny because people that speak Portuguese, yes, I understand more than I read. I can practice my English. Okay, sounds good. Estoy en acuerdo con eso. Um, the it's funny because people that speak Portuguese, side note, they can understand Spanish, but it's hard for people who just speak Spanish to innately understand Portuguese. I have a hard time understanding Portuguese, but if I speak Spanish to someone who speaks Portuguese, they can understand what I'm saying. Small note if you're in Miami or if you're in Orlando, where there's a lot of Brazilians as well. Nice people, great beef, but that's just something for you to know. And just so you know, Brazilians, most of them look like Europeans because there's so much European influence. So I know a lot of people think that all Hispanics kind of look the same. We don't. Most of them look very European, unless they come from Rio, which has more of the African heritage. But anyway, back to comics. So anyway, I picked this up. This is Ultra Heaven. This is the first of three volumes. It's by Keiichi Koike. This was from 2001, 2002. I got this. It looks like an interesting book, but I found out that after three volumes, he never finished the manga in Japan. So I'm going to read this and see if I want to read the other two volumes that are going to come out, even if it's unfinished. It reminds me, I think it was, I think if I'm not mistaken, it was Tezuka never got to finish Phoenix. That's why I've never read Phoenix. I kind of wanted to finish the story. But so far, this looks pretty good. I mean, the art, it's a future basically where people take psychedelics, legally prescribed psychedelics, but this guy takes too many, and then you wonder, like, in the whole thing is you wonder if, like, is he being patched into a whole another dimension, or is he just frying his brains out and thinking that he's seeing stuff? So, but it's a nice oversized manga volume. It's thin, but it's quite heavy. So it's got good paper. It's by Last Gasp. Um, that's the publisher, and actually comes in with actually has a dust jacket, which is not unusual. I found out that apparently it's not unusual for manga volumes to have a dust jacket. It's just so you don't see it that much anymore in America. But this is the cover without the dust jacket. Looks pretty interesting, and I'm looking forward to reading it. And I usually read, yeah, them Portuguese, that market. Oh, I'll have to check that out then. Yeah, that's something that I may have to learn because um, in Miami there's an increasing presence in business, especially from people from Brazil. So it might be handy just going forward. But yeah, maybe if I could read Portuguese, I could, yeah, because it always bothers me. Like sometimes you'll see a book like today. There's a channel called Mobius Chronicles, and this gentleman, I think he's Italian. He does these really nicely produced videos, and they're about Mobius books. He lives in Europe, and obviously, and he'll cover these books that are either in French or they're in Italian, and And sometimes they're translated into English, but there's all these Mobius books that are printed, and he'll talk about them because they're published in Europe, but they're not published here, and he grabs everything. So it's quite frustrating to see these books sometimes from these great cartoonists that are being published, but they're not being published for the American market. Um, and I do know, I think there's one huge Comic Con in Brazil, because I know Sienkiewicz, Bill Sienkiewicz, does I think three a year. He does the one in Lake Como, Italy. He does one in Sao Paulo, and then he does San Diego. And at his level, he only does three cons a year. Yeah, Sao Paulo. I forget the name of it. I'm sorry, but I know it's a big one because even Marvel will like go down there and have a presence. So it's one of like the big three worldwide conventions for maybe non for books that are like more mainstream. And I'm not talking like small press or independent. I'm sure they have a presence there, but it's really big two, toys, movies, and Sienkiewicz now is at that level. And it's funny because I met him at a con in 2000, I think 2012 here in Miami. He was a nice guy, and I was a fan of his from the '80s. So I almost started fanboying in front of the guy. He's a very nice guy, but now he doesn't do cons. I think he does. I think he's done Heroes Con in the past, but um, other than that, I don't think he does very many. And at this point, I don't think he has to. He's. I love his work. So I just remember that. But there's some books, like I said, from these European masters that just don't get translated. And even when there's like older translations, like Philippe Drouillet, if I'm pronouncing correctly, Dark Horse did a lot of his work in Dark Horse and Cheval Noir, in their anthology. But it's black and white. And what I found, at least for me, I'm not an artist, is that the work, especially these European cartoonists, I mean, the draftsmanship and the drawing is excellent, but the work really pops when it's in color. And then I think about that as Mobius's work too. His black and white work is excellent as far as draftsmanship, but it really has that beautiful impact in color. And I think, and that's what I like about this book. It's all in color. Really get to see that beautiful European coloring that they do, and also, and I have a Drouillet book, Vuz. It's okay, but it's really two color. It's not black and white. It's like this dark blue and white, if that makes any sense. Um, Hi, hi, Doka. Hi, you're a NASCAR boy. Um, but I mean, like some of the stuff doesn't really work unless you have like color, even if it's a night scene. But I think it works better in color, and so it's hard to and they don't do a lot of the stuff. It's not printed in English, and it's not printed like this. Like as much as this would look nice, you know, pen, pen and ink on white paper, and color is where you really has the impact. And I found that with me, a lot of these guys, especially um, these masters from the '70s, really had CCXP. That's right. Um, Thank you. And that's where you find that their art really shines. That's why I like Inside Mobius 3 so much because there's just a lot of beautiful color as opposed to like maybe the Major, where the Major has a lot of black and white. I mean, as an artist, I'm sure you can appreciate the way he draws and all that. I'm not knocking anything, but I think that the full impact is color, as opposed to manga, where manga is drawn in such a way that you can have a lot of that impact with just black and white. And sometimes when you see it in color, like some manga, the first few pages are colorized, it's almost like distracting because you're not used to it. That's just my personal opinion. Um, but yeah, that's really what I've got this week. I haven't gotten a lot. I've been trying to read through this thing, like I said earlier. I'm about 300 pages. I'm on 296, so I'm about 60% of the way through this book. Um, Really interesting story. I'm hoping to finish it up by the end of next week. I like to always finish at least one book a week. And one book that I am reading about 75% of the way through is Beautiful Monster. That's been published by Bubble Zine. It's a collection of, I think it's Maruo Suehiro. Was a mangaka who was famous in the 80s, 70s, and the 80s, maybe 90s for erotic horror manga. And it's an anthology of 16 stories. And I can't show you the book even if I had it in front of me because I think YouTube would have a problem with it. Um, there's probably almost no perversion in that book that isn't explored. Um, but they all read a lot like erotic nightmare horror nightmares. Um, some people, if you're faint of heart or you have very sensitive stomachs, some of it is going to be kind of like not your cup of tea. Some of it's not my cup of tea, um, but it's more story driven as opposed to like Junji Ito horror, which is where you have like really grotesque monsters. Um, it's not that kind of horror, or it's more just it's like fevered dreams and nightmares, if that makes any sense. But it's interesting work. Um, Not usually my cup of tea, but sometimes you have to read things that you normally wouldn't read and push your boundaries. Maybe you like it, or maybe you read it and say, okay, fine, I can appreciate it for what it is, but it's not your thing. I think, we don't all have to like everything. Hello, Mr. Cheeto Show. Um, I don't think we all have to like everything. That's one of my big pet peeves. I think you don't have to like what I like. I don't have to like what you like. There's some people that love Creator X and they think that Creator X is awesome, and I'll sit there and I'll think, yeah. But that's just my opinion. Um, it's not to badmouth anybody. Um, but I've seen some people that be like, oh my God, they're so good. And this is why I often don't do negative reviews on my channel. There's two reasons why I don't do negative reviews. One is that I don't want to be negative. I think we have enough negativity as it is. I think if we just want to see negativity, we can just turn on the news or we can go on social media. There's a lot of negativity in the world. So why am I going to add to it? And there's too many people, as part of that, there's too many people on these comic programs that try to like say stuff and incite, and anything with pop culture, say these things to incite people to get outraged, to get clicks and all that. And I think that that's great if you want to do that just so you can get viewers because you're trying to monetize all this. But if you're just doing it as a fan thing, then I think to me it's just a waste of time to just whatever. But there have been a couple of times where I've put reviews that were kind of negative. I didn't trash the book. We're kind of negative, and and I got so many comments like, "Oh, I can't believe you didn't like this book. Why didn't you like this book?" And I explained why. Oh, but I can't believe you didn't like this book. And I just got tired of just hearing the same question. It's just like, you know what? If I'm not feeling it, I'm just not going to talk about it. This is why sometimes if you ever like see my Instagram and you'll see like I got book X, and you never see me write about book X, or you never see me talk about book X, is because I really didn't like book X, but I'm not going to sit there and talk about it because, negatively about it because just dealing with oh, I can't believe you liked it. I think that it's okay to be an individual and not follow the herd all the time. That's just my opinion, though. And that's it. I don't have as much to say this week. Um, but I just thought the last time I did this, I had fun and actually had decent engagement, and a few people knew that I hadn't gotten to know before, which is always fun. But really, oh, one thing, a couple of things I did do this week. When I went to a con called UltraCon in West Palm Beach. This was September. I picked up a lot of cheap underground comics, like women's comics and weirdos and nothing really expensive. They were like $3 each, so I had like about 10, 12 of them. And I'll tell you, I can appreciate what Underground Comics did for the art form. There's some really good art in them, but I really don't think the stories, like Fabulous Freak Brothers, I actually thought was pretty funny. But a lot of these stories, I just don't. They just, for whatever reason, they're okay for me, but they're not like super awesome. So I know a friend of mine who loves underground comics, so I'm gonna send them off to him tomorrow, just as kind of like a gift because him and I have traded in the past, and I told him, hey, listen, I don't want anything, um, you know, um, just give it to it. But also, I have a friend of mine on Instagram who is a art teacher at a high school, and we were talking, and I said, hey, listen, I have some graphic novels that I'm trying to like cull from my collection. They're not bad. I'm just trying to make space. And I said, would you be interested? Because he's a teacher, and my oldest son's a teacher, and teachers, they don't make a lot of money. So he said, well, he's got the green light to teach a graphic novel course the next upcoming school year. So he's like, sure. So I sent him like 15, 16, 17 graphic novels. I'm going to mail them to him tomorrow. Um, and it's more just I wanted to do something with them. I didn't want to go through the hassle of selling them and hoping that someone would buy them and then have eBay take their huge cut and all that. I would rather just gift them to somebody who I know is going to appreciate them and get them to good use and putting them to and maybe using them or some of them as ideas for making comics to a bunch of high school kids, to me was like really a cool way of just handing these books over. I mean, if I have a book that's worth $100, $150 or more, I'll probably sell it. But if I have something that has some value, but or I didn't pay much for it, sometimes it's just like I don't mind giving it away if I know it's going to go to a good home. And I was very happy to do that. So I made some space, which my wife was happy about, but also they're going to go to a good cause. Because you never know, maybe one of these kids in high school reads these things and gets an idea. Maybe in 10 years, we'll be reading one of their graphic novels. And I think it's sometimes good just to get back. I mean, I like money, I like making money, but sometimes it's not always about the money. Sometimes just, you know, doing something to give back, to people who are trying to help for the art form of comics in America. And I think that I keep saying that on there. I think that might be it because I don't really have an agenda or a list. I'll just put books here and say, hey, I'm going to talk about this. And if nobody goes online, I'll be out in 5 minutes. And if somebody goes online, I'll be on there a little bit longer and answer questions. But really, I want to thank everybody who's been engaged, who's made comments, who I've met through here. Um, I do a lot of reviews on comics. I've been thinking about trying to do nicer, more hip, more slickly produced reviews going forward, but more for the fact of just the challenge of having to do something that looked a little bit more slick produced. This is not something to generate money, and this is not something to I'm just going to review the books that I like to read. You'll rarely see me talking about Marvel or DC books, especially current ones. I don't hate them. I read those books for like 40 years. I'm just over them. Um, I'm sure some of them are well written and some of them are interesting and drawn nicely, but I'm just kind of over them. So um, I think that the attitude in Japan where people always read manga is that as they grow older, they read different types of manga. I think that's the way I approach comics. Like as I've gotten older, I really don't have the urge to read superheroes or talk about superheroes. Maybe um, there's some rare occasion I will, but overall, I really don't want to talk about them because it's been there, done that, read a ton of them. Um, And so I just talk about books that I like to talk about, which is why I'm never going to have like thousands of followers. Because if I wanted thousands of followers, I would talk about two things: either what's new with Marvel and DC, or about speculating and grading your comics. Although I think that back issue market is the prices have gone down. I think if we have the recession that we're expecting to have, you're going to find those back issues to go down in price too. And so if you have cash and you're thinking about buying some older comics, I don't know about the graded comic market. I don't really grade books. But there's a market for that. Keep going. I'm going to finish. Okay. I think that if you're going to do that, that's up to you. But I think if there's certain issues that you're looking at that are expensive, whether or not they're great or not, just scarce, and you have the money, and you don't need to save it because you need to pay bills or do whatever, it's just really discretionary spend, then you may want to hold off on buying things now unless it's a tremendous deal and just wait because just like when the government pumped money into the economy by giving them stimulus checks and all of a sudden people were staying at home making money from unemployment plus an extra $300 a week, and they were getting 500, these $1,500 stimulus checks. That's when all the prices of all back issues and all that just jumped dramatically because everybody had cash. Now when you have a recession, you have the opposite effect. You're gonna have, and I don't mean to be a bummer, but just kind of like how real world impacts comics. At this case, if you do have a recession, you do have job loss. A lot of people in the federal government are losing their jobs. And regardless if you think it's justified or not, what is going to happen is that those people are going to lose their jobs. They're going to spend less. They're going to spend less, which means stores get less income, which means that they're going to have job losses or cutbacks. And then it's a bunch of dominoes. So financially, just try to keep some money afloat. Just have some money in savings. Hold off on that big purchase if you can. But if you do have money and you don't need to pay bills or your bills are good and you're looking for an expensive bank issue, man, you may want to hold off because at this rate, you may be able to get a better price as the year goes along because all these tariffs that we're doing, we're not going to feel it immediately. The stock market feels it immediately because the stock market is sort of like it's basically a future projection, is a projection of future earnings. So if they think future earnings are going to be down, the stock market goes down. If they think the future earnings are going to go up, the stock market goes up. That's as simple as you can make it. And the fact that we've seen the stock market drop significantly in 2 days, and I don't see anything that's going to revive it. What that's going to do is that's going to make it harder for people to afford things, and you're going to see people like willing to probably take deals. That's just my honest opinion. The stock market does not like uncertainty, and we have a lot of uncertainty running the country. So, and if you think about, I don't own stocks, I don't know 401k, how does it impact me? It impacts you, it impacts everybody. It's just not immediate. It's sort of like a canary in the coal mine kind of thing. Do I know Juan Padron? I mean, have I heard of Juan Padron? I don't think so. The name sounds familiar, but I don't want to say yes. That's a question I got. Do I know Juan Padron? Is a Cuban cartoonist. No, I don't know Juan Padron. Or I can't recollect anything in my mind right now that Juan may have drawn. The only Cuban cartoonist that I know, top of my head, is Eder Rodriguez, who did Worm, that came out in 2023. Fantastic graphic novel. He's in the last year, he's been to Paris, spoken at comic shows in Paris. He's had his book translated in a few languages. It's his experience as far as being coming to this country in the Mariel boat lift and growing up as a child under the Fidel Castro communist regime. That is one that I see him speak in person a couple times. That's the only one that I can right now remember. But I'll look up Juan Padron. I don't know if he's still in Cuba or if he's went to Europe or something. You should check his work, especially his movies, Vampiros and La Habana. All right, I'll check it out. Um, it's one thing that you're gonna find here in America is that, especially in Florida, is that since Cuba is run by a communist country, is run as a communist government, we paint them as the bad guys. So any kind of culture that comes from Cuba isn't really, it's not popular because the Cubans that are here hate the communist regime, so they always try to like keep it suppressed. And the American government, likes to point fingers and say they're the communists, so they're the bad guys. So a lot of times you have to go to Europe or you have to go to Latin America or you have to go to Mexico, especially Mexico, to find out things that are being done in that country. It's you have to kind of seek and find or know someone like yourself who knows. It's quite interesting, but you really don't know unless somebody tells you, and it could be really good, but they try to suppress all that stuff coming out. Anything that comes out of the island, like, oh, that's communist, and it's like, well, they're artists, so I mean, the art is the art. It's not political nature unless it's military propaganda. It's quite interesting. Um, I have a cousin that went down there. She's a professor at the University of Michigan. Took a bunch of her students there. Extreme poverty. Some of them said they were crying when they saw the poverty that was there. They had a, good trip. They were treated well, but those kinds of things are few and far between because, um, for whatever reason, we have an embargo and we don't want them to. We don't want to reach out to them. We kind of like want to starve them into submission. Um, it's a shame because they're 90 miles off the coast. You rather have them as, if not an ally and a friend, at least not an enemy. It just makes long term. It just makes more sense for national security. But sometimes people don't have um, common sense. Uh, and that is it. I think I've been on here much longer than I thought I would be. Um, Appreciate you guys keeping me here. It is 9:35. I have to get ready to go to work tomorrow. Fortunately, I'm working remote tomorrow, so I'll be home. Um, Again, I will be mostly reading and trying to bring down my list of books. I do have an Instagram channel. It is RC underscore comics, COMIX. I couldn't think of anything better. And that's where I post like comics related information, posts, things that I like, things that I think are pretty interesting, and just kind of spread the word. Anyway, thank you all very much. I appreciate you all. Pleasant evening. Have a good week. Take care of yourselves. And for all of us in the United States, be safe out there. We're living in interesting times. Good night.